So I'm going to start this off with some more of the mindset topic around leading into the show. And I'm just going to kind of talk at it from my experience, just to give you all some ideas. I do realize that my entire life is committed to this sport for the time being. I know that's not how most lifestyles are, so that's why I say take my ideas and kind of make them yours where you can apply them, because we all have different lifestyles. We all have different schedules, different jobs, different goals, and priorities. So when I say these things, that doesn't mean that if you can't do it this way, that you're not going to be successful, but you should kind of start to take these and say, how can I make this work for me? So the most important thing to realize about this sport is you only have so much control in it. And there are so many variables that we cannot and that we are not supposed to control. And it took me a long time to realize that, because I used to I'm a responsibility person. I think if I can control this, then that's me taking responsibility of my outcomes, which is good to a degree. But we also have to realize where that drops off, and life will teach you very quickly where you are not in control. And at that point, I look at it kind of like a yin and a yang. It's like if we get really good at yin, then we also have to get good at yang, meaning sometimes the other side of equipping ourselves is not being in control, but being receptive and adaptive. And that has become my number one weapon. I recognize further out that I can't control everything, but I can control my thoughts and how I choose to react to things. So if we're just talking about prep stress, I 100% promise you that life is going to test you, and it's not always going to be as it seems. I've been tested in some really weird ways, and some of them don't aren't even prep related. I would say that they are external things outside of competing, but that still affect my mental or emotional capacity. And so a lot of me being good as a competitor is actually me managing the outside components in the circle outside of competing. And so I run three businesses. I have three businesses, and that's not easy. But in order for me to be a good competitor, that means I have to handle my business outside of competing. And that also means that I have to create a boundary for myself outside of competing. Like when I do business, that is my focus. When I do prep, that is my focus. And that doesn't mean over the course of months, that might be within the hour. So I put, I'm getting better. I'm not perfect. I'm getting better at the practice of establishing my boundaries, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen me talk about this in my stories. First, figuring out what those boundaries are for you. There are mental boundaries, emotional boundaries, actual physical boundaries. So it'd be a good idea for you guys to start asking yourself, like, where are my boundaries in my areas of life, and especially with people? So the deeper I get into prep, the stronger my boundaries have to be to keep those compartments separated. And that honestly, that sucks. It sucks for me in prep when at this point the dieting isn't the hardest part. With the boundary setting, it's really tough to take people that we love and ask them to give us space. And it's taken me many years to even feel okay with me doing that myself. But when I look at it as means for survival, that's sort of how I have to treat it. And if people deeply and truly care about you and your goals and your dreams, they will find a way to understand. Part of the hardest part of competing is you lose people and friends, people who you thought were your friends or your loved ones. That's a really tough thing to deal with, because this sport is selfish, and we have to be selfish because we are the ones that are doing the work. Other people aren't doing that work for us, and they can't know how that feels unless they have been in the seat. And so it almost helps if you think like you're going to live your life, you're going to serve by example by pushing toward your dreams, and that's going to turn some people off, but it's also going to turn some people on. And I've lost people who I thought were my friends or supporters, but in the long run, it wasn't really a loss because I gained more people back in that space who are supposed to be here. And they're people who I can help by me carrying my actions and my passion in this example. So that's just something to kind of accept. People show their true colors in prep. And that hurts sometimes, but you can also kind of separate that. Like I actually have a therapist now that I talk with her about these things, and I journal a lot. And so just offloading that in some way or getting some sort of a soundboard is great if you've got someone that you can talk to. That's a good way to manage those aspects. But then your time management is also extremely important. So I block things out and I treat everything in my schedule like an appointment, including my workouts. So I prioritize, I have the option to prioritize my time block for me. And I treat that as it's the same way I would with an appointment with a client. If I wouldn't show up late for a client, I don't show up late for myself. If I'm expected to show up in uniform, that means my uniform that day is my gym attire. I have that in my car ready to go. I've got my shoes everywhere that I need to make sure that I don't have an excuse not to show up for my job in my uniform. And so having backups is important and planning ahead is important. But I think one thing that I underestimated early on that I'm getting more realistic about with myself now is to a lot more time than you think you need for that block. So even little things like, oh, if it's going to take me 15 minutes to get to the gym, I carve out 20 minutes because realistically, I'm going to forget something in prep and that's going to cost me an extra minute. And if I get on the road and I have to go back to my house, that can add up to an extra hour in your day. So I have this little trigger in my head that says, if I hear myself and I say, I'll do that later, or I'll remember to do that on the way out the door, I call bullshit on myself. And I say, no, Autumn, you're not going to remember that. Stop everything you're doing right now and get ahead of it. So if I think there's something I need to grab for the gym the next day and I say, I'll do it later, I stop what I'm doing and I go put that bag in my car so that I don't end up accidentally adding extra time. Or self-care is really important. So if you are someone who is extremely busy and you've got a lot of people relying on you, whether those are clients or your boss or your family, other people that you're actually responsible for their lives, just remember that we hear it all the time, but it just never hurts to hear it again, that you cannot serve other people if you can't even serve yourself. You might be able to temporarily, but you're not going to be able to do that long term. So making sure that you take care of yourself, or even in the depths of prep, that is going to be crucial for your success. So I'm still going to hit on some things here, but they kind of tie in closer to show day. So I would say those things that I mentioned are things to be practicing months and weeks out. But especially as you get closer to show, you also need to make sure that you're carving out time for not just your workouts, but the things around your workouts. Like posing does get overlooked a lot because we are so busy and because we're so taxed and we're tired. Like there are times where, trust me, I don't want to pose. But if you can show up for yourself in your practice for 2 minutes at any point in your day, that's better than 0 minutes. And that will tie into some of the questions we got later when I address these things of like how and when you should practice your posing. But make sure that you carve out time for those things, especially like your meditation. Visualization is huge. And going into a winning mindset, I think one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself is to create a reality before you get there. So this sounds ridiculous, but the closer I get to show, I make sure to add 30 seconds to each of my posing practice, and I practice winning. And you can look up podcasts and TED Talks on this, on how body language reverse sends signals to your brain. And this is so stupid. But even in my practice, I make sure to take my hands overhead in a victory pose by myself in my room, because that is a body language signal of success. And that does rewire your brain. So You can do that in private if it feels ridiculous, but I encourage you to practice what it would feel like winning that overall title or that trophy or your pro card, and creating those feelings and that reality is only going to fast forward what actually happens. And so like if you can go there in your mind before you get there on stage, it will feel like it'll feel familiar. It'll feel like it's already happened to you. And I can't tell you how many years that I practiced winning my pro card as I was falling asleep at night, driving in my car. Like I dreamed about it and I felt it before it ever happened. But I imagined how would it feel to hear my loved ones cheering for me? How would it feel to call my dad afterwards and say, "Hey, I did it"? Those that's emotional. It's important for you guys to do those things. And I think that's part of enjoying competing and your experience in it. It's a job. This is a hard ass sport, but those are the fun parts. And ultimately, what I think bodybuilding stages are great platforms for us to practice manifesting and creating our dreams. So that's what I like leading up into the show and into your practice. I could go on another tangent on things that I do before show day, but that's the take home I want you guys to actually start applying is feeling and connecting yourself with success before it happens. So I'm going to put a little stamp on that for my mindset talk for you all right now. I do want to get into some of these submitted questions.